Okay, on this episode, I'm going to be talking about the first 9 years of the Trojan War. Now, a lot is not really known about this time period, mainly because the Iliad, the main source of the Trojan War, only takes place during the last year of the war, so it's kind of, I think, basically later writers kind of added in parts and stuff. But Homer does kind of passingly kind of remark about some of the things that happened in the first 9 years, basically treating it like we should already know what's happened. So, not sure why that is, but maybe somebody else had written about that, or maybe even Homer had written stories about the first 9 years of the war, and they've just been lost to history. But regardless, a lot of stuff happened in the first 9 years of the war. Go figure. I mean, it's 9 years of warfare. A lot of stuff's going to happen in between the start of the war and where the Iliad starts off. Basically, most of the fighting would have been mainly skirmishes and kind of running battles. There wasn't really any standing armies just going at it for 10 years like maybe most people would think. Definitely seems to have been touch and go. And most of the time, the Greeks probably didn't have their whole army there on the beaches of Troy. So they would have been out gathering supplies, sailing between Troy and Greece, bringing in supplies and maybe more soldiers. I mean, this war lasted for 10 years, so, you're going to have an entire generation of young men grow up to be old enough to fight in the war. And the Greeks also would have been raiding up and down the coasts of modern-day Turkey, sacking villages and cities and basically taking the war to Troy's allies. And in fact, it is said in the Iliad that Achilles and Ajax and all the other heroes may have conquered like 11 cities and attacked 12 islands. I mean, they were definitely raiding. Basically picture Vikings, but in Pentaconter ships, basically. So, yeah, a lot of that would have been going on. They would have been taking supplies. They would have been getting concubines, slaves. They would have been selling slaves all over the Aegean Sea, basically, all across there, all the islands and back in mainland Greece. Basically the standard practice probably would have been when they took a city, kill the old, enslave the kids, rape the women, make them either your personal sex slave or make them camp whores for the army to, have their way with. So, pretty rough. But, I mean, this is the kind of warfare and the time period that we are talking here. I mean, this is this is pretty rough stuff. Achilles definitely would have come into his own during this time because you gotta remember when the war started, he was only 15. So, the older he gets, the stronger and, better he gets, the more experience he gathers and just... I mean, he really becomes a killing machine and a terror to the Trojans and their allies. I mean, he's taking cities left and right. He's killing enemy soldiers by the hundreds, at least. Maybe by the thousands, who knows. I mean, I've seen some pretty crazy figurative statistics, basically, on the casualties during the Trojan War. I mean, some say maybe by the time of the Iliad, 100,000 people have been killed in this war, so... I don't know, but I mean, who knows? I mean, look at all these cities being razed to the ground, all these, skirmishes and running battles can definitely add up over time, so who knows? I mean, it's definitely would have been bloody warfare. And the gods themselves seem to have been taking some part in the war. I mean, if you listen to the ancient sources, the gods definitely kind of picked sides and stuff. I think for the most part, until the Iliad, Zeus was pretty neutral during the whole thing. I mean, according to them, Zeus was the one who came up with the whole idea for the Trojan War because he was kind of worried about all these demigods running around the earth. Basically the sons of gods and goddesses running around. He was, a little worried about them if they ever decided to turn against the gods. He kind of wanted to have a major war to kind of thin their ranks. But Athena, Hera, Poseidon, Hermes, Hephaestus, Thetis, they were basically all on the Greek side. But, I mean, sometimes they might help a Trojan out. Like, I think Poseidon saved Aeneas' life once. So, yeah, but for the most part, they were hardcore Greek sides, especially Athena and Hera. Mainly because, Paris gave the golden apple to Aphrodite, so they were thinking, well, fuck him, So, yeah, they were basically on the Greek side. And on the Trojan side, you naturally had Aphrodite supporting Paris. And you had Ares, Apollo, Artemis. So, Trojans definitely had some powerful ones. But we're not entirely sure the things that the gods would have done in this time period. They don't really seem to... Shit doesn't really seem to have hit the fan with the gods until the Iliad, so it kind of seems like they would have just kind of helped out their chosen sides here and there, but nothing really crazy going on during this time. Now, for the Trojans, the longer the war went on, the worse things got for them. I mean, Paris, I don't think was really fighting really at all, which is kind of crazy seeing how he started the fucking war. So I think he was just kind of just maybe taking part in councils and stuff and not doing a lot of fighting, which naturally pissed off his brothers, Hector, Dephobos, and all the other guys. So that had to be kind of annoying. Basically, Hector's fighting the war to save his country so that his brother can, fuck another man's wife. I'm sure that had to piss him off, and rightfully so. But Hector really did a great job defending Troy. I mean, he was able to gather a lot of allies and stuff, so I guess his two most famous allies would have been Sarpedon, who was the king of Lycia. Sarpedon's a pretty cool guy. He was the son of Zeus, and his mother was Laodamia, who was the daughter of Bellerophon, who was the Greek hero who killed the Chimera, so that's a pretty badass bloodline. And the other great ally for the Trojans was Aeneas, who was the son of Aphrodite and Anchises. And Anchises had gotten jiggy with Aphrodite, but afterwards Aphrodite told him don't tell anybody. And of course Anchises did what every guy does. He told everyone that he had gotten jiggy with Aphrodite, so out of spite Zeus threw a thunderbolt and hit him in the foot and crippled him, so he was never able to walk again, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Aeneas would definitely be a big help for the Trojans, and he would go on to do some pretty interesting stuff later on in the war and after the war, so yeah, we'll definitely be hearing from Aeneas again. So yeah, things were kind of, I guess, okay for the Trojans. I mean, they were able to get allies, they were able to feed themselves, keep fresh water coming in to the city and stuff, and they were able to keep the Greeks from, piercing the walls of Troy, so they were definitely doing as well as they could. A couple of the relationships on the inside were getting a little interesting, though. It kind of seems like Paris and Helen's relationship kind of went up and down. I guess like any relationship between a man and a woman. But if you recall, before Paris met Helen, he had a wife and son. His wife was Ione, and his son was Corythus. Now, it's been several years since Paris abandoned his family to, go live in the city of Troy and shack up with Helen. And it kind of seemed like Ione got a little jealous of this and was naturally spiteful. So when her son, who was probably a very handsome young man, I mean his father's Paris and his mother's a mountain nymph, so he's probably naturally going to be pretty good looking. I don't know what her motivations were, but her plan was probably to break up Paris and Helen's relationship. So she sent her son Corythus into the city of Troy to basically kind of seduce Helen. So I guess he had to kind of work his way into the royal palace and stuff, and maybe he was a servant or something. So it wasn't too long, though, before he had, sweet-talked Helen into, I don't know if they ever got jiggy with it, but they were both naked when Paris came into the room and found Helen, in a compromised position with Corythus. Only problem was, though, that Paris didn't know it was Corythus, his son. So, naturally, in a fit of rage, Paris killed the man who was naked with his wife. So, tragically killing his own son. So that was pretty crazy. I'm not really sure, though, if he ever found out that that was Corythus. And I guess when Ione never heard from her son again, she might have put two and two together. So, yeah, it's pretty tragic that happened. And another relationship that got started, I guess, would have been Hector marrying his wife, Andromache. Andromache was born in the city of Thebes, not to be confused with the city of Thebes in Greece or Egypt. There's actually a Thebes not too far away from the city of Troy. So it kind of seems like, I don't know, Hector just kind of went there maybe trying to, support his ally and stuff, and maybe get some support coming his way, more troops and supplies and stuff. And I guess that's when he met Andromache, and it kind of seems like he just took her with him back to Troy. But he did give her father a shitload of wedding gifts and stuff. But they were very happy together. I mean, she was considered like the most perfect wife in antiquity. I mean, she was a perfect wife. And unfortunately, not too long after she went and married Hector and they moved to Troy, Achilles attacked the city and killed her entire family, basically. And her mother, I guess, who went to go live with Andromache in Troy, she soon died afterwards of an illness. So poor Andromache lost her entire family to the Trojan War, so that was definitely a tragedy. So the only person she had in her life was Hector. I mean, her father was killed by Achilles, and her 7 brothers were also killed by Achilles. I mean, Achilles, man, he was definitely ruthless when it came to taking a city. But she was definitely in love with Hector, and he loved her, and they definitely had a good relationship. But Hector was really the only person she knew in Troy, so. But I think about maybe a year or so before the Iliad, they actually had a son, Astyanax, who would, I think, only be like a year old by the time of the Iliad, so, yeah. But he was definitely a good boy, and his father and mother loved him dearly. And unfortunately, we'll see what happens to Astyanax later on in the story. But yeah, Hector had a good family. He definitely lost a lot of brothers in these 9 years, though. I think by the time of the Iliad, he only had Paris, Deiphobos, and a couple of other brothers still left alive. One of Hector's brothers, Troilus, there was a prophecy about him that if he lived to adulthood, Troy would never fall. So there's a lot of these steps that the Greeks have to go through to take Troy, and this is just one more of those. So the goddess Athena comes before Achilles and tells him, hey, you got to go and kill this kid, Troilus, because if you don't, I guess when he becomes an adult, he will maybe, I guess, be like a great warrior or something, but prophecy says in order for Troy to fall, Troilus has to die before he reaches adulthood. And I guess Troilus was only about 10 or 12 at this time. And he was said to be a very handsome boy. Some people even said that he had to be the son of Apollo. He was so handsome. So one day, Troilus and his sister Polyxena, who was also very young, they were out riding their horses, and they were going to a well that wasn't too far from a temple to Apollo. That's where Achilles ambushed them. And Achilles, being a very fast runner, was actually able to run up to Troilus, grabbed him by the hair, and pulled him off the horse before he could get away. I guess Polyxena probably was able to get away, but yeah, in some sources it sounds like Achilles tried to maybe rape Troilus because he was so handsome. So, yipe. But either way, Troilus was able to get away, and he actually ran to the temple of Apollo, seeing how Apollo supposedly really, really liked Troilus and might have even been his father. He thought he would be safe there, but Achilles goes in there after him and cuts off Troilus's head and then decides to mutilate the boy's body. So, yipe, Achilles. Jesus Christ. Yeah, this would definitely make Achilles a villain, especially nowadays. I mean, shit, he tried to rape a boy and ended up cutting the kid's head off. And God knows what mutilation means. I mean, they cut the boy's dick off or something, or they just hack him to pieces. I mean, just holy shit, Achilles. But yeah, so that's pretty crazy. And that's just another reason why Apollo hates Achilles' guts. So, yeah, pretty crazy, but that's just one more strike against Troy, one less son, and nips that prophecy in the bud, so to speak. And naturally, all the Trojans are just mortified by this. I mean, especially Priam and his queen Hecuba are just devastated by this. And in fact, Priam, I don't think he ever gets over the death of Troilus. In fact, he kind of accusingly compares his other sons to Troilus, saying that they aren't as great or as beautiful as him and stuff. So it's kind of a touchy subject for the Trojans after this. So yeah, that was a pretty rough thing for Achilles to do, but it's a pretty rough war, especially for King Priam. I mean, he's losing sons left and right. I mean, this had to be so devastating for him. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's a prophecy or what, but it's kind of seems implied in the Iliad that everyone knew that Hector was going to die, probably fighting Achilles, and Troy was doomed and all this kind of prophecy kind of stuff. But right now, I think for the Trojans, they're just kind of putting their heads down and trying to fight through it. You never know. Maybe we can win this war. It's probably what they were thinking. But the longer the war goes on, the more Trojans die. I think the more animosity builds up against Helen for, a lot of people are blaming her for it. But I think among the men, they are definitely blaming Paris for this. So I think that will eventually boil over into what happens early on in the Iliad, when Paris has to face Menelaus for the hand of Helen. So the Trojans are definitely toughing it out and trying to stay alive, basically, and also just trying to outlast the Greeks. Now, over on the Greek side, some interesting things are happening. I guess by this time, Achilles would have known that he was a father. His son Neoptolemus would have been born on the island of Skyros to Deiodamia. You remember when Achilles was hiding out on the island of Skyros before the war got going. So, yeah, that had to be kind of interesting for Achilles. Unfortunately, he would never meet his son, so, had to be kind of bitter for him. But at least Neoptolemus was well taken care for. I mean, he was a prince. So King Lycomedes definitely took care of his, I guess that would have been his grandson. Neoptolemus had a nickname as a child, Pyrrhus, which meant red for his red hair, because he had red hair like his father. And if you remember when Achilles was hiding out there, he went by the name Pyrrha, which was the feminine version of red. So, kind of interesting. Neoptolemus would grow up to be a very fine-looking boy who was very skilled in the arts of singing and dancing and also fighting, much like his father. But it seems like Neoptolemus would grow up to be a much more cruel and brutal person than Achilles. Maybe it was because he grew up in a time of war, his father wasn't around, and probably maybe because his mother wasn't happy. Maybe he just grew up in a rough time and just, I don't know. But Neoptolemus would definitely grow up to be a brutal adversary for the Trojans. But for right now, he's just going through his childhood, so let's see what else is going on. So let's hop over to the island of Lemnos. Poor Philoctetes is still there with his foot injury. I guess he survived somehow and was basically just surviving any way he could. Probably just having to crawl around and hunt animals and gather water any way he could. It just had to be a horrible existence for him, especially knowing that the largest war the world has ever seen is happening just like 100 miles away. This had to be maddening for him. Speaking of madness, I'm sure it had to be driving Odysseus nuts to be around Palamedes, the man who saw through his ruse of playing mad so he wouldn't have to go and fight in the Trojan War. And Odysseus never forgave Palamedes for seeing through it and dragging him off to fight in the Trojan War, taking him away from his wife Penelope and his young son Telemachus. So when Palamedes started bitching about the war, basically saying, oh, let's go home, we're never going to get inside Troy, Odysseus saw his moment for revenge. Seems like Diomedes didn't like Palamedes at all either, so Odysseus hatched a plan with Diomedes to kill Palamedes. Now, there are a couple of different versions of what Odysseus and Diomedes did to Palamedes. One source says that they took Palamedes on a fishing trip and there drowned him. And another one says they threw him down a well and threw rocks down on him until he died. But the more popular version, and the one I think is more true to Odysseus' style and cleverness, he got together with Diomedes and decided to, seeing how Palamedes has been bitching about the war and trying to get everyone to go back home, Odysseus decided to forge a letter from King Priam addressed to Palamedes, basically making it look like Priam is paying Palamedes to try and get the Greeks to leave Troy. And for good measure, Odysseus or Diomedes hid a bag of gold in Palamedes' tent. So naturally somebody found the letter, then found the gold, and then went and told the Greek commanders about it. And then without so much as a trial, Palamedes was put to death by stoning. And it kind of looks like Odysseus and Diomedes were the executioners, oddly enough. So that was kind of interesting. And a couple of months after that, Palamedes' father, Nauplius, sailed to the Trojan shore, and when he got there, he demanded justice for the death of his son. I guess he had been told about it through a message or whatever that his son had been executed for treason, so he showed up and wanted some heads to roll, but everybody was like, Palamedes was a traitor. Go away, old man. So, understandably, from his point of view, Nauplius was definitely pissed off about that, so he swore revenge on the Greek commanders. So on his way home, he stopped at all the palaces of the Greek commanders and told their wives that the Greek commanders are taking new Trojan brides. And so when they come back, they're going to replace the Greek wives with the Trojan wives and make the new Trojan wives queens of their kingdom. So that definitely pissed off a lot of the Greek wives, and they started cheating on their husbands, like the wife of Diomedes and the wife of Idomeneus. And he might have been the one to convince Clytemnestra to start cheating on Agamemnon. I think I've been calling Clytemnestra Clytemnestra, and after hearing some people say her name and looking more closely at the way it's spelt, I guess I've been mispronouncing it as Clytemnestra instead of Clytemnestra. Clytemnestra sounds like an STD you get from having sex with a woman while she's on her period, so yeah, oops. But it's not like Clytemnestra is an easy name to say, so bite me, I guess. But yeah, if they ever come up with an STD that you get from that, definitely call it Clytemnestra. So he might have been the one to convince her to, start cheating on her husband Agamemnon with his sworn enemy Agathis. But I don't think she would have needed much convincing. After all, Agamemnon did kill their daughter, so yeah. And I'm not sure if it was during this time or maybe even after the war, but Agathis and Clytemnestra had about 3 children together. So yeah, things are getting a little crazy back in Greece. Back on the other side of the Aegean Sea, the war was going pretty well for the Greeks. I mean, they had food, supplies, slaves, women. I mean, they were doing alright, and they were definitely winning everywhere but the city of Troy. And in fact, Ajax attacked the city of King Teletus, who was a king of Phrygia, and killed the king in single combat, and then took the man's daughter, Tecmessa, as a lover. And they would even have a son together named Eurysaces, I guess, which is actually the name of Ajax's famous shield, so kind of interesting he would name his son after his shield, but that was a hell of a shield. So they would make an okay couple, it seems. Kind of weird how in these stories it seems like a lot of the men are just taking the women and everybody being honky-dory with it. But Ajax wasn't the only one to find love on the battlefield. When Achilles attacked the city of Lyrnessus, that's when he met Briseis, probably right after killing her entire family, mother, father, 3 brothers, and her husband. Nice. So after the city fell, she was given to Achilles as his prize to become his concubine. That's pretty brutal, but she could have just as easily been given to the army as a camp whore to be passed around from soldier to soldier, which I'm sure just had to be a hell of an existence. Probably no telling what kind of venereal diseases and mistreatment she would have received. But, I mean, it is the old days, so, yeah. I know being given over to Achilles would not have been the easiest thing for her, but sure as hell beat that life. Achilles did have a nice compound, though, and in fact his dwelling was made out of lumber, and the compound had its own wall and gate, so it was a pretty nice pad, I guess you could say, but, I'm sure when Briseis showed up, she was just absolutely terrified being surrounded by Greek soldiers, and I'm sure she had to be just totally upset about having to share the same dwelling with the man that killed her family. But Patroclus was very kind to her. He assured her that he would make Achilles take good care of her, and maybe even Achilles would marry her. So she definitely was soothed by Patroclus's kindness. I guess Patroclus knew what it was like to lose a home after he and his father had to leave their home after Patroclus's accidental killing of his childhood friend. I don't know, but that was good on Patroclus's part to be kind to Briseis. And so, oddly enough, Briseis and Achilles would grow to be very close, and I think Briseis and Patroclus were very close too. But I'm sure in her private moments Briseis mourned the loss of her family, but she had to go on living, and Achilles and Patroclus definitely did all they could for her, oddly enough. But not all relationships went so well. Agamemnon took the young woman Chryseis from her father Chryses, who was a priest of Apollo, and basically Agamemnon made Chryseis his concubine, which was a big no-no, but I guess the gods hadn't really been meddling too much in the war up until now, so nobody was obviously afraid of them. I mean, look at all the stuff Achilles was getting away with, so I guess Agamemnon didn't really think twice about taking the daughter of a priest of Apollo. But I don't know. I mean, there definitely seemed to be some, superstitious warriors in this war. I mean, Hector always seemed to have a kind of a sad, tragic aspect to him, like he knew that he was going to die in this war, and maybe all of Troy with him. Whether he knew or not that Achilles was going to kill him, I don't know, but yeah, definitely seemed to have a sadness to him. And Achilles definitely seemed to have a tinge of fatalism to him. But I guess that's because of the choice he made. He chose to have a short life with glory rather than a long life without glory, so he definitely knew he was not coming back from this war. And I guess it was the prophecy from Calchas. Before the Greek fleet set sail for Troy, back at Aulis, he saw a snake slither up a tree and devour 9 baby birds, and then when the snake devoured the mother bird, it turned to stone, and Calchas declared, "Alright, the war will last for 10 years. But I don't know, I don't really think that happened. I mean, everybody would have been like, "Hey, we only got 4 years to go, man." I don't think that prophecy was told. I mean, I think the Greeks wouldn't have ever fought the war if they knew it was going to last 10 years, so. But I don't know. Everybody definitely seemed to have a superstitious or a kind of a fatalistic view of things going on. But for right now, everything was okay for the Greeks. They had supplies, they had women, their weapons were sharp, their armor was clean. They were definitely doing pretty well. But little did the Greeks know that the priest of Apollo, Chryses, was bringing a wagon load of treasure to their camp with the intention of getting his daughter back one way or another.